Hi everyone, I'm Amrita Ghosh and welcome to yet another exciting MEHFIL. Today's episode is called CounterBlockbusters, and yes, we'll be talking about Bollywood blockbusters, but not in the way you expect. The focus is on cool, alternative, subversive, independent films that give us a very different version of India. We have two great guests. Writer, poet, lyricist, screenwriter Hussain Haidry joins us from Bombay, and I'm hoping he can give us an inside look into the film industry. Our second guest is film scholar and cinephile Alka Kurian, who joins us from Seattle and might be able to tell us what's wrong with Bollywood and what we should really be watching. Welcome to the studio, Hussain and Alka.
Thank you.
Hi, Amrita. Thank you so much. Hi, Alka.
Thank you. So we're here to talk about current trends in Indian cinema. And it's quite an interesting time, as we know, with Indian films getting accolades in the West. The Golden Globes and the Oscars have shown us how popular very nationalist films like RRR have gotten this global spotlight with their songs going viral and so on. So my first question is for both of you. How do you understand this recent trend of nationalist films like Pathaan, RRR in India? Do you think it's like a symptom of a post-pandemic excitement where people just want to be out and about? Or is this yet another phase of nation-building films, which, historically we know has happened all throughout?
Alka, if you can.
Oh, why don't you go first?
No, I would.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think this is indeed a very interesting question, why we're seeing a spurt of these kind of films. But talking in particular about Pathaan, I would say that it's while on the surface it looks fantastic, to an uninformed audience you wouldn't know the history to the surprising success and unexpected success of Pathaan. Because I think before we talk about Pathaan's popularity, we need to think about where the central character of one of the central characters, the hero, Pathaan, comes from, because the trajectory hasn't been very easy for him. As you would agree, Shahrukhkhan being a Muslim person, acting in Bollywood in a way that is moving away from its secular agenda that used to be the case until, let's say, about 2 decades ago. So he's located at this very interesting, crossroads of popularity and demonization. For example, in 2015. When he made a comment about India becoming intolerant, he's immediately sort of dissed and gaslighted and compared to the worst of the terrorists by some ministers, of the regime, right? Yes. And then, of course, we see in 2021 his son was jailed on fabricated cases of drug peddling or drug possession, etc. And the right-wing trolls at that time, they clamored against the film. Before the film was released, they clamored against the film featuring Muslim heroes, and they called for like this bizarre expression like a Khan Mukt Bollywood, right? Mm-hmm. And what does Khan do? He just keeps a low profile. And I'm also reminded of the comment, a similar kind of a comment that Amir Khan and his then wife Kiran Rao had made about, like them being, filled with a sense of despair and despondency. What kind of an India this is, and it instantly they're trolled. So they all begin to sort of keep a low profile. And as we learn that Khan hit the gym, something that we see, so wonderfully, so beautifully, the results of in Pathaan. So I think we need to sort of keep that,
Sure.
Yeah. Wonder if Hussain wanted to say something to that.
Yeah. I mean that's a very wonderful way to put it. Like he is in the crossroads between popularity and demonization. I see RRR and Pathaan very differently. I think they're two very different films. They are located very differently. They cannot perhaps be categorized in the single dimension of a blockbuster only. While, of course, I mean that is the similarity that both of them are large-scale films which are supposed to provide a spectacle to the audience, which are supposed to provide action to the audience, which is right now the belief that this is only what will draw people to the theaters post-pandemic, like Amrita mentioned. However, I do place a film like Pathaan and RRR very separately in terms of what you're talking about. And how they're talking about is pretty similar in terms of scale.
Yes.
And
but they're very pro-Indian, like they're very nationalist in their core.
I was about to say that they are also nationalistic. That is one way to look at it, but it is very different. To look at the nationalism that Pathaan says and talks about, and it's not that it is flawless and it is perfect. It's a different kind of nationalism, or rather patriotism, that they are talking about. I think Pathaan. When I look at RRR, I look at it as a film which is a major film in the part of the larger gamut of films that are coming in the last 7 or 8 years, which are reshaping the Indian history, which is a retelling of Indian history, where there is a Hindu nationalist overtone. There are Hindu heroes being glorified. I mean, whether it's Manikarnika, whether it's Prithviraj Chauhan in that league. I mean, those, and it does. Caters to the. It does cater to the kind of Hindu nationalist rhetoric of the present regime in India. Pathaan, on the other hand, what it does, like I said, it's not a proper. It's not the most appropriate and the perfect nationalist quote patriotic film. It has its own issues. Is that to keep a Muslim name as the protagonist, while Muslims are on the periphery in RRR, they are invisibilized. They are not the heroes. They're just some guys randomly. They have taken an alibi off. One of the protagonists has taken an alibi off, and then the Muslim narrative dissolves. The whole film in the first half is about India's freedom struggle, and then it becomes how the Hindu quote unquote has got India freedom, or they're fighting for freedom. Pathaan, on the other hand, is not that. Pathaan, why I do not like that film for different other reasons. Why I like that film is because it is subversive as much as it is pandering to the nationalism. It is as subversive as it is pandering. Because there are many things in Pathaan that they have done to keep a Muslim protagonist in the film industry. Anybody coming from the film industry would tell you that it is not very easy to keep a Muslim protagonist. It is not easy to release a film with the name Pathaan in this era. At this scale, it is also there are many things which have been shown in that. Like, for example, there's an Afghan family, Afghan village that ends up saving India. There are many things that like an ISI agent is of course has allegiance to Pakistan, but then she says things like even our people won't want that kind of things to the people for the people of India. So there is. I think it is harking back to it is shifting the gear. Ultra nationalism, which is probably running on the 4th gear right now. It's dialing it down to the 2nd gear, which was perhaps the old syntax of nationalism in movies, Indian movies, and 20 years back. So the dialing down basically says that okay, we have to say that there are good and bad people in every community.
I want to say that. I do.
Yeah.
Hussain.
So I think that they are two different films. There is element of subversion and counter narrative in Pathaan as much as there is a problematic narrative in politics.
Right. And I just wanted to sort of say that so what I said earlier was about the pre-release of the film. The history of Shah Rukh Khan. And then if you compare Shah Rukh Khan's history with the history of the two characters in RRR around which the narrative is constructed, right? So those characters are embedded, they come from the Telugu region, right? Nationalist heroes, historical sort of figures, who then become mythologized and fictionalized in the film. So if you make this very interesting sort of comment on the location of Pathaan as this Muslim named hero, and then we have the location of these two heroes in RRR. One of them is a Hindu, belongs to the upper caste, and the other person belongs to the Adivasi caste. He's an Adivasi person who also masquerades momentarily as a Muslim.
Yes.
So in a way, in that too, you have in a way that, we could argue that both the films diversify, or both the films actually risk centering alternative identities in the narrative, right? So in Pathaan, you have three alternative identities. You have, two Muslim people. You have Rubaiya Khan, and Pathaan himself, and then you have John Abraham, who's a Christian person. So you have these three minority identities that are center stage.
Can I quickly intervene, though? I'm thinking, and I'm agreeing with both of you, but here Pathaan is also somewhat of a mysterious Muslim character, because it's told that he's an orphan and we don't exactly know about his lineage, whether he's a true Muslim or not. So how really subversive are these mechanisms operating? And, go on.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is that location becomes identity. Locations, I mean, of course, it has been shied away from. I mean, the film is, I don't personally have a problem with that shying away. I'll tell you why. I mean, I understand, I get that argument. It's the reason why I don't feel is because I understand how bold and how daring and what a huge risk it is to name a film Pathaan in the film industry. To go ahead with a Muslim protagonist and with a Muslim name without really saying that it is that. Branding it as an action film and as a masala film, entertainer and things like that. I think I would be okay with that. In RRR, however, the difference between the location over here and that is that in an era where Muslims are demonized or hate speeches are videos are seen every day in every like several parts of the country every day. To keep that as protagonist is very different from keeping a diversified cast portfolio of Hindu characters and then making them heroes. I mean, even if you look at RRR, I mean, the kind of people who have been made heroes. There's one scene in which this guy says that, okay, let's get that sergeant. And he's trying to provoke to get a hold of who's actually behind to get that girl, the young girl. So it's that Bharat Mata ki Jai, Bangla speaking. That is that not a reference to there's a Bharat Mata over there? Even that Vande Mataram, cloaked in that Vande Mataram flag, and the main protagonist coining the term Jal Jangan Zabeen in the end. I mean, there's a whole credit sequence which has Sardar Patel, which has everybody that essentially RSS wants to appropriate.
Yes.
It excludes Gandhi. It excludes Nehru. Were they not part of the freedom struggle? Was Vande Mataram the only slogan being said at the time? I mean, there were movement-specific slogans that were said at the time. I mean, every time you see a Ram Mandir and there's a small idol of Ram, and this person will go and respectfully touch, and even from a gender point of view, I mean, if you differentiate between the film, Pathaan has female characters which are strong. Deepika's character is strong. You may disagree with the execution of it and the cheesiness of it and the mainstreamness of it. That is fine. But look, would women be happy in portraying the character in RRR, or would women perhaps be happy in portraying a strong agent character of? You get my point, right?
There's also very fetishized and glamorized alcohol guzzling, female protagonist, and it's very objectified. I'm critical of
even John Abraham is objectified. Even Shahrukhkhan is objectified with the abs.
I agree, but she's obliterated from the film, whereas John Abraham is still the very last scene. And also Kashmir. Let's talk about the.
Oh yes. That's what I said. It has a lot of problematic politics.
Yeah,
and
it does. But if you just sort of talk about the gender politics over here, so so the one thing that the one sort of parallel that we can draw between the two films, or where the impossibility of the parallel, is that Pathaan is this major blockbuster North Indian Bollywood film, and you have RRR, this Telugu film that is that took everyone by surprise, right?
Yes.
So and particularly in India, I think the success of RRR in the Western world is what surprised people in India. They didn't expect that. So So Shah Rukh Khan, despite the troubled history that he comes from, right, the legacy, the band, the baggage that he carries, and the way in which he subverts that baggage, is totally different to the kind of baggage that a film like RRR had to face. It's a Telugu film at a time doing so well at a time when the whole world mostly it lives in this ignorance that all Indian films are Bollywood films. So you have this regional film, which is actually the second largest film producing regional industry in India. Mm-hmm. It comes number 2 after Hindi cinema, but actually it makes more films than Bollywood, and many of the Bollywood films are actually Telugu remakes, right? So given that history, the kind of popularity that RRR managed to acquire a year before Pathaan comes, right? So we need to think about that. But and also the fact that one of the reasons it's the film is production value of the film is like a fantasy film, where you have these people doing the most impossible kind of stunt scenes and things like that. And given the kind of the popularity of the two actors that you have, one is like NTR Jr. and the other person, he's like extremely popular in Andhra Pradesh, and the other person is extremely popular in Telangana. So putting these two narratives, putting these two sort of actors together and bringing their own fan clubs together, that itself is a feat. But then for the film to begin to hit the charts, only when, if I'm right in understanding that, only when Netflix releases the film in Hindi, in its dubbed version in Hindi. The Pathaan is in Hindi, stroke Urdu, right? But the Telugu film, dubbed in Hindi, is released on Netflix. Netflix does these kind of things as well. It's sort of, it released even Bahubali in Hindi, right? True. So we need to sort of think about, yes, the two films can't be compared, but at the same time, we also need to sort of locate them within the politics of the North-South divide, within the politics of this linguistic hegemony, where the film will only do well if it's sort of dubbed in Hindi, which so many critics, for example, Monica Mehta have said that, it sort of undermines the authenticity. Now, I just want to quickly talk about the gender politics in both the films. Someone like... So you have Ram and Sita, right?
Yeah.
The character Ram is actually deeply troubled. He's like a deeply flawed hero, right? He, sucks up to the Brits. And of course, we know given the history of his background, his father, really was sort of, he's forever been wanting sort of like lay his hands on guns, on weapons, right? So which is probably the reason why he wants to sort of become part of that, the uber colonial sort of zone. But even then, so he becomes part of that. He beats up people from his own character. Now the film has also been equated with Lagan. Lagan was successful. Again, it's a Hindi film. It's a upper caste Hindu male actor, a male character, then upper caste Hindu female actor, a female character, and the Dalits are on the they're marginalized. So
also very anti-colonial in their sort of rhetoric, right?
Most anti-colonial. But I just wanted to quickly come back to the gender politics. So the filmmaker is, he projects himself as secular, which is actually quite ironic because his film comes across as so deeply steeped in a particular kind of Hindutva ideology that we are seeing today. But he also says that he considers himself to be a secular and a great fan of Ayn Rand and, Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead and all, where he's very much inspired by the sheer determination of characters. But he gives a twist to gender politics because it's not Sita who's going to be rescued. It is Ram who needs to be rescued. So and of course the film is also situated historically. The eroticization of the female character. If Pathaan was made, it was, I think, RRR is set in 1920s or something like that. If Pathaan was set at that time, you couldn't have had the actress like Deepika Padukone be completely eroticized, So it's and have that kind of an agency. But I just want to sort of trouble that, while it's easy to, it's good to look at these two as parallel narratives, these blockbusters, but also one needs to historicize it. One needs to sort of look at it from the lens of gender politics that was possible now and which is not possible 20 years or 100 years ago.
And, you both have talked about the sort of subversive yet very nationalistic cores of the two films, one more than the other, and that the masses have been captivated by these two films in very separate ways or in similar ways towards the nationalist core of Indian politics right now. Can you recall other films in the past that have set up this kind of hypnotic spell, but have also been politically having this kind of problems on the surface?
I mean, you have films like Roja.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. And Roja for having being promoted by the state, being shown tax-free, projecting this particular kind of a narrative that is set in Kashmir, this Hindutva narrative, anti-minoritarian narrative, the Muslims are sort of demonized. The other film, which is also very interesting from that point of view, is Dil Se. It's hugely popular blockbuster.
Yeah.
And in the northeast of the country. But interestingly, I used to teach in England, and it was like when Dil Se was released, I was sort of slowly moving into cultural studies because I used to teach, European languages. I used to teach French. I was moving into South Asian or post-colonial cultural studies, and one of the first Bollywood films that I saw after a gap of 10 years was Dil Se, and I was showing this to my class, to my gender studies class, gender and cultural studies class, and I was showing it in a theater with a capacity of 200 people. So I saw it on the big screen. I could not sleep that night. My God, those images kept sort of revolving in my head. And later to read that the film actually tanked in India initially. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, why would such a film tank? And then research, I had to do a lot of research, and it seems that the film tanked because the female character is a terrorist. So you have this female character as a terrorist, so once again, the gender politics is deeply troubled, right? Because in Roja, the female character is the victim, she needs to be rescued. She's, oh no, she's not a victim. Of course, she goes to rescue her husband. But in this film, in Dil Se, the female character is a terrorist, which, was deeply troubling. And it's the hero tries to rescue her, but he cannot tame her. It's sort of his journey into this narrative becomes a journey of education. You say, well, did you not know what's happening in the northeast of the country? So that I thought was really interesting. So instead of being rescued, instead of being able to rescue the girl, the heroine, he ends up dying with the heroine. He perishes along with her. So I just thought it was really very interesting.
That is very interesting. And I was even thinking of Chak De, but that's another conversation. Hussain, did you think about any other films that come to mind?
Yeah, so first I'd like to correct something that I said that there were even men being objectified, but Bhakti saying that women also have a different history of objectification. So I stand corrected over there. I think that is a fair point. I do stand corrected over there. So yeah, I mean, what is the film? I actually I think this might end up looking very bad for at least anybody in the film industry ends up hearing me. I was about to say Bombay, but I think you have covered Dil Se and Roja. So this is
right there.
It's like if I watch it now, I don't know if things were done deliberately or, but it is of course. I mean, clearly, I mean the common link in all the three films is Mani Ratnam. It's not deliberate, and I mean we haven't come up with the examples. I didn't know what you're going to come up with. I had it's just coincidence कि तीनों एक ही filmmaker की है. But I think perhaps the surprise of this comes because these films were revered so much when they had come. Perhaps these films are being mentioned now because people have had a late realization of the potency of the poetic propaganda that was fed to them in the past. And that the realization now, or at least to people like me now, I mean, I did like Roja. I mean, not perhaps Roja, but I did like Bombay very much when I had watched it.
Right.
So, I mean, my disappointment actually comes from that. I mean, there are several scenes in the film, like there's one on police brutality, like Arvind Swamy as a journalist goes and speaks to the police, and he's talking about you have opened fire on unarmed people, and he's like, yeah, but they were pelting stones or something like that.
Yeah, I
or they were
remember.
attacking us.
Yeah.
And then he says that, yes, but you can't shoot them just like that. You have to take other things. And he's like, yeah, but what to do? There was a lot of chaos. And then he's like, but don't you know that Muslims were killed more? And there were very less Hindus. And he says, yes, so what can I do? And then the policeman gives a justification, which is, you don't think I am a human being. You don't think I have to go back to my family. You don't know the kind of fear that you have when there is so much of the mob chasing you and things like that, and that is why we had to do what we had to do. And then Arun Swami says, and then he says that, do you trust us or not? Yeah. So then he says, yes, sir, we trust you, and what you're doing is correct, and we understand. We are also you, and you know how much we trust you. So I was, when I saw that scene, I was like, this guy knows the arguments.
It's carefully thought out, right?
Yes, he knows the dynamics of this, what is happening over here, but he chooses to take it there and then withdraw it.
Yeah.
In that scene, if you also look at the violence scenes in Bombay, when the riot, quote unquote, actually begins.
Yes.
Yeah, the cuts are made in such a way that Bal Thackeray and the Muslim person who is leading, both of them look like they're equals, and both of them are provoking it like equals.
That's a great example, actually.
And that is not how it is. Is Bal Thackeray equal to any? Was Bal Thackeray equal to any Muslim leader in Bombay at the time?
Yeah.
Has there ever been a Muslim leader in Bombay which has been even close to Bal Thackeray? That is not how it has happened. Also, like the Babri Masjid demolition, how has that been shown in the film? There are newspaper cuttings, and there is a dome which is shown in a faded background, and the way it's shown in a dissolved way, as if it's a passage of time that has passed, and then you see the image of an empty slum, and a Muslim man comes out, say with a sword or a hand raised, and he says Allahu Akbar.
Yeah. Oh my God.
What is a more potent image to remember, the Babri Masjid demolition or a Muslim man saying Allahu Akbar?
That is so interesting. Like it's really interesting what Hussain, you're saying about like the kind of a very carefully crafted argument, right?
Yes.
Which leads you to believe that the person that the character that we're seeing, or even the narrative that we're seeing, is not. They're not totally bigoted. They come from a very informed. They are bigoted, but they come from a very informed position, right? And they're making that particular kind of a choice. The other two films are kind of one of the films that comes very close to that is that also comes close to that is Fana. There's one of the first films. You have this Muslim protagonist, centered, who's shown as this, this kind of a romantic tour guide to immediately turning into a terrorist. But even within his own persona, he talks about the ways in which he too is manipulated. So while the film projects him, the film is like sort of framed in a very nationalistic framework, right? So the film starts with Sare Jahan Se Acha, the mother telling her blind daughter, turn towards the image of turn towards where the flag is positioned, and there's Sare Jahan Se Acha. So, but the Muslim victim, although he's victimized, he also he's aware of the ways in which members of his own community are manipulating him. And the other film that has this kind of a conversation also is Haidry, where they actually do talk about in Fana, Tabu's character talks about the referendum that never happened.
You mean in Haidry? Tabu in Haidry talks about it.
In Fana, Tabu is the cop. When she comes in the plane, she's talking to Kajol's character. Come on, where's your husband? Where's your husband? Can you tell us where he is? So when someone in the intelligence agency, she works at the intelligence agency. Someone in the intelligence agency, or her boss in the intelligence agency, he says, well, what are you doing over here? Why don't you go and make custard for your daughter, So she's the one who knows what the stakes are. And she says, the referendum never happened. So it's very interesting, a film that is framed in a nationalistic term that kills the Muslim terrorist, also complicates the argument, why the Kashmiri people are angry, where the rage comes from. One of the things that we actually haven't talked about at all is the role played by the fans. A lot of these films are successful. In particular, a film like Pathaan became successful to the extent that it did. There was no marketing, there was no formal marketing, only Shah Rukh Khan sort of launching a question, releasing a question on Twitter, ask me anything. But then it's his fans who build up this, this whole ecosystem of buying the tickets in advance, even buying tickets, even if they're not going to watch the films. So I think we need to sort of remember the role of the fans. Yeah.
Within the theaters too. I mean, when I watched it in the US, the entire crowd creating a certain kind of atmosphere, cheering, especially at very problematic moments of national calling, those are things to watch out for. But, I want to move away from blockbusters into what we are calling counter-blockbusters, right? And there's obviously an alternative landscape of films that hide beneath this popular dominant Hindi film industry. New streaming platforms have made it possible for all of us to access really interesting independent cinema. And it was much harder when I was younger to really get access to such films. I recently watched on Netflix a film called Sir by Rohena Gera, and I really liked it very much. What is the scenario today? Are there films you can think of that are pushing these boundaries in ways of subversive topics, issues, narratives? Are they resisting big blockbuster cinema, so to speak?
I mean, sitting in the diaspora, my experience is totally different, because I don't have access to theater releases of a lot of the films, that Hussain, you are able to see. I mean, they do now, of course, a lot of films are coming into,
I was going to say.
Yes. Yeah, now they are. But I think one of the ways in which this narrative subversion began to happen was with the rise of the OTT platforms. One of the very first films that I saw was Parched, right? Which, so if you look at some of the main, blockbuster cinemas of Hindi as well as, Telugu cinema, because RRR is also about dosti, about friendship between the two men, which in so many ways replicates the dosti of, characters in Sholay and Namak Haram and things like that. So a film like Parched, so a lot of these films subvert the narrative by centering, on the one hand, the narrative on women, and but at the same time using similar kind of tropes of friendship. So a film like Parched is about 4 women, who are, brutalized by the patriarchal system, but they somehow manage to escape from there. And then you have films like Lipstick Under My Burqa, right? These women living, like what's her name? I'm forgetting the name of the filmmaker. Lipstick Under My Burqa.
Alankrita Shrivastava.
Alankrita Shrivastava, of course, she's phenomenal. So she made Lipstick Under My Burqa. Then she made Dolly Kitty and Wo Chamakte Sitare. And then she made I think before that she made Bombay Begums. So it's really interesting to see the ways in which I see these 3 films, these 3 sort of texts connected. Lipstick Under My Burqa is about these, frustrated women who are not able to sort of, exercise their agency, whether, in terms of, their sexual agency, or one of the girls, she wants to open a beauty parlor, the third person wants to be a musician, and how they use subversive means of exercising their agency, like either, this girl sort of hiding behind the burqa, or talking to the other person, talking to her supposed lover on the end of the phone line. But they can only go so far. The next film is Dolly Kitty and Wo Chamakte Sitare, where actually they leave the small town India and try to go to big town, to big cities, but they're trapped in Greater Noida. They can't go there. They can't go beyond Greater Noida. And then you have women and their relationships with each other in Bombay Begums, where these women, highly subversive. The film is the web series is highly subversive, where you have women, you have subversive characters. For example, there's a bar dancer, there's a bisexual person, there is a bisexual, character, there is a woman who wants to climb the corporate ladder, doesn't want to have children. There's a woman who has climbed the corporate ladder, but who can't have children. Women that bring questions of, abortion or miscarriages and menopause and period. I just think it's a fantastically subversive narrative.
I'm also thinking.
Not to forget in Dolly Kitty and with Chamati Sitare, one of the characters, she actually works in this company that provides phone sex. Highly subversive.
Hussain, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so the ones that I can remember are, I think, one is Fandry.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I haven't seen that one. I should watch it.
Yeah, Fandry is a film that completely blew me away, and I didn't even know that what it was about. Anything. I was scrolling and I found it. But it blew me away because I was first intrigued that it is a pig catcher story, and I have seen pig catchers in the village that my maternal house was, maternal grandparents' house was. So I was just intrigued, okay, what the story is going to be like, because I've seen them, and like right after we had a drain outside our house. It was sort of a hutment. Then there is a lot of subversion in the sense that, first of all, there is a Dalit person, lower caste person, who is the protagonist, and it's not a pity story. It's an aspiration dream story. That boy wants a girl. It's that simple. And it humanizes on a different level. It's not talking about pity. It's talking about the several limitations that they have. It's talking about the everyday humiliation. And it also subverts nationalism in a way that I have never encountered. It's in an extremely poetic film. Fandry, I think, is an extremely poetic film. Where it subverts nationalism for me is when the national anthem is playing, and the boy and the pig catcher have to freeze and stand as they get humiliated for what they are doing, and everybody is laughing at them. And I have never seen the national anthem. I had a very different visualization of how I would probably want to show the national anthem before I had seen this film. But I saw this and I was like, shit, someone has done it, and it's way better. It's not on winning a game. It's not on some kind of war victory that the national anthem is played. I had a different imagination of it. But the way Fandry has done it. Then one film that I quite like in subversion is it's a recent film. You'll probably see it in the coming year. It's called Kayo Kayo Colour. It's a Gujarati film. It's a black and white film. It's a 4:3 aspect ratio. It's beautifully shot, and the entire film is about, I think, 1 or 2 days in the life of a Muslim family in a slum in Ahmedabad.
Wow!
And there is, it is subversive because there is, it's just 2 days in their lives: mother, father, daughter, son, 4 people, and just different things that are happening in their life. There's a certain economic strain, the kind of life they live, the kind of food they eat, what are their houses like, what are their daily activities, how do they bide their time. It showed many things. Like, this is one thing that I've always wondered about how to show in cinema, and it shows that I wanted to show the boredom of children. When you're a child, how bored you are because time does not pass. And this Shahrukhkhan Chavada, who's the maker of the film, has been able to show that. And of course, I mean, because it's a Muslim film, it's in a ghetto and they're economically strained, and the father's looking for a job, and their mom and dad are sometimes fighting, and they are doing this. You feel like something is going to happen, maybe they're going to get attacked. There's this lingering because there is a state presence. Automatic invisible state presence that you start having whenever you see a Muslim film these days. But nothing happens except until the very last scene. And what happens in the last scene is something that happened to everybody. It's something that happened to everybody. So why I like it is because it does not. Like I said, to make a film with a Muslim protagonist today in this country is a huge. On one spectrum there is Pathaan with a huge, massive budget, and on this one end, Kayo Kayo Colour, this guy was shooting wedding videos, but then he started watching international cinema. And you should look at the film just for its aesthetic visual beauty.
Wow.
And it's subvertive because it does not it gives you a glimpse into the whole family and not just Muslim perspective, also poverty perspective. Like, you're poor and there's nothing glorified about it, there's nothing pitiful about it, you just live with poverty.
Sounds amazing. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Nandita Das has recently made this film.
Yes, Zugato.
Zugato. I haven't seen it. I'd like to see it, but it's interesting you talk about this film that centers poverty, because I'm reminded of how until about, let's say, like in films in the 60s and 70s, they used to be about the working class people, right? And then in the 80s, still there's a moment of transition. And then, of course, you have the demonization of minority and that kind of a thing takes over, or the NRI kind of things. NRI kind of films take over. So it's really interesting you talk about this, because in addition to the centering of the ordinary people, that Zugato does, or this film that you're referring to, what we're also seeing is a centering of older characters, because in the past, older characters are like marginalized. There's, they're like play the role of grandfather, grandmother, mother, and father, etc. But if you see a film like Vad, Sanjay Mishra and Sanjay Mishra, he's sort of this old man who's, old and poor man who's been abandoned, and his wife Neena Gupta, they've been abandoned and by their only son, in whose education they've invested such a lot of money, who's gone abroad, and these people, the parents can barely pay for their food and stuff like that. And the son says, of course, it is also caricatured, but that's okay, because that's a different thing. But what I'm talking about is a centering of older people and older people's narratives, which I think is so subversive, because in a way it didn't used to happen in the past, right?
And not as a spokesperson of a certain kind of rhetoric, which is the old traditional values that one needs to harken back to. This is
no. This person, there's a scene in which he's massaging Neena Gupta's knees. Neena Gupta has hoisted her sari, and you can see the knees of this older woman. So that kind of it's like immediately it shows that immediacy, but at the same time shows that sensuality in an older couple, which I thought was so beautiful, which is different to Badhai Ho, where Neena Gupta, she becomes pregnant at the age of 52, but in a way it's like glamorized and Bollywoodized, it's different. Vad is totally different. Similarly, films like, Once Again, which is a sequel, which is supposed to be a sequel to Lunchbox, this.
I didn't know that was a sequel.
Yeah, what might happen? Although the filmmaker decries this comparison, the filmmaker says, don't cheapen my film by comparing it to Lunchbox. But this story is about, I think, the way I'd like to read it. What happened? What might have happened if they'd actually met? So but they're both in their middle age. This woman is a widow. She has a son who gets married, and all the difficulties of starting a relationship again at that age. And there was another film with Madhuri Dixit where she comes out as lesbian. So these are very interesting subversive narratives that we are seeing these days. With these older characters and their sexualities and their class positionalities and their desires and aspirations are centered, which makes them so subversive and beautiful at the same time.
Go on, Hussain, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so Vad reminds me, and Sanjay Mishra and Old reminds me of another film which I think is subversive in a very different way. That's Aankho Dekhi.
Oh yes,
and I mean, I
have seen
may not fully relate with the whole philosophical aspect of the film, that I will only believe what I touch. But what that film subverts for me, and it's extremely painful for me to watch, is it shows the partition of a joint family in India. It shows the brokenness of the joint family and the dysfunctionality of the Indian joint family. And it shows how when a joint family breaks, it rips apart like a cloth. And I mean, there's a shot in it where the bed is being carried from the middle of the house to downstairs and all, and then there's a shot in which they say कि आना भैया आना, मतलब वो याद करते हैं आपको देखने आना. So this is something that is families in India have gone through in the last 30 years, but nobody has talked about it. What we want to talk about families in Indian films are the happy things.
True.
What we want to talk about.
That is so right. In fact, in a way, if I may take the freedom to make a comparison, you could compare this film with Garam Hawa, which is a different dynamic that rips the families apart. It's the partition and the aftermath of the partition. In a way that the same narrative is again centered in a film like Manto, where you have the central character who cannot decide where he wants to be. So you either have these external factors, the political environment, the ideological, the internalization of some kind of ideological beliefs, that's apart, or it's social class that you're talking about.
Right. But I'm also thinking, sorry to jump in.
I think in Aako Dekhi they implode, I think is what happened. They break from within, and in Garam Hawa it's outside that.
Yeah, it's outside, but at the same time, it is embodied. The breakup of the family then becomes embodied in the person of the daughter who kills herself because she can't take it anymore. Because she sits at this intersection of inclusion, rejection. So when it happens to her for the third time, acceptance, rejection. When it happens to her for the third time, she'll take it anymore. She kills herself. Yeah.
But I'm also thinking that you're giving such amazing examples from the current times because of the streaming platforms that have created that kind of accessibility. And yet, subversive cinema and resistant to the larger blockbusters were there in the 60s and 70s. We were thinking of this parallel cinema, what they were called, right? And they were there, right?
Of course.
So I guess the streaming platforms have created a certain kind of space for the larger reach towards those kinds of cinema. And my next question, I'm really interested in, Hussain, your take. You are a poet, lyricist, and you're a screenwriter for films, Hindi popular films, or not so popular films, as an insider.
Actually, not so popular.
Not so popular. So, but you're an insider, so to speak. So tell us if you feel that things are shifting and transforming with songs, with the film plots or writing itself. Are things getting better, or would you say not so much?
Yeah, I think I should calculate what I'm going to say. Speaking too much has its own risks associated.
Absolutely.
So I suppose that I think it's a good time only and perhaps only for those who want to make quote-unquote subversive cinema, which is going to be counter to the wave of narratives that are going on, which are largely nationalistic and communal in nature. I think that one way is to go completely independent and have a low capital investment, and then just be at the mercy of film festivals and perhaps some OTT if they choose to take it. That is one way. I don't see any other way of doing that because, the OTTs, a lot of the producers, most of them at present is, from what I understand, are not willing to take risks which might come with some kind of dissent. If they are, perhaps they are afraid or concerned that even if the state would sniff any kind of dissent in a film, they would perhaps just go bankrupt the next day. Wow. Perhaps this is the kind of paranoia that they have. I'm perhaps exaggerating also, I may be wrong. But yeah, this is true that if you go with a certain anti-establishment, so to say, film, and it may end up harming the state's narrative, or at least a narrative that is important to the state.
True.
then there, in all probability, either that film would be self-centered, censored by the writer himself. I know how many films I don't want to pitch because I know they will not get made. So I think 80% of the work just goes away because I'm self-censoring myself. And there are many writers who are self-censoring them. I'm not the only one. Then it is at the producer level, whether they would want to produce it. Then it is at the actor level and many other things. I mean, they want to do it. And then it is at the distribution level, finance level, and eventually at distribution level or OTT transition level. So there are several stages that one would have to cross. So is it the best time to make any kind of counter subversive cinema? Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to go out on a shoestring budget and if you're willing to do it and then you expect no returns and perhaps, I mean, just some glory in film festivals, and yes, I think, yeah, I mean, it's the best time. And if you want to make a mainstream film, if you want to make a mainstream film like Pathaan is, I mean, why am I, despite all its problematic politics with respect to Kashmir or many other things for that matter, why am I saying that it is a very powerful film and it is not exactly a nationalist film like RRR? RRR is very poetic and potent propaganda. Pathaan is not that. Pathaan is different. So why am I saying that? Is because it is very difficult to right now make a 200, 300, 400 crore film, which will make the establishment very unhappy and yet be successful. So yeah, I mean, that's
painful to hear. I mean, we're talking about finances and budgets and what creates the cut.
Having said that, I'm sorry, I'm just interrupting you. But having said that, there are still people who are fighting. There are still people who are making that space. There are still people who are trying to do things the best way they can in mainstream. And I mean, I appreciate them. And but yes, is it very easy? And is it can it be done by all, and or even twice or thrice the number of people who are doing it? Perhaps
not.
Sorry, I had interrupted.
No. If I can ask you a question, Hussain, since you're from within the industry, I'm sure there is somewhere between, there is a film budget that is between, the multi-crore budget and a shoestring budget. Like a film like, a web series like Sacred Games. It sort of really sort of surfaces the ways in which the narrative, the grand narrative of India has been sort of completely bought over by religion, and it's sort of and of course it refers to other things as well, like corruption, political corruption, police corruption, and all of those kind of things. So those kind of I don't know how much money it costs to make a web series like Sacred Games.
No, that's a very big budget.
Okay, but what about Dolly Kitty? I mean, of course, the film itself. I don't know how expensive the budget was.
So I think right now, I can safely say that it is very difficult to make something like Sacred Games or Leela in today's times.
Right.
Yeah. Right. On a channel like Netflix, and that has something to do with the excessive fear of action that the state has put into the minds of the people in the film industry, and perhaps 1% the overestimation of what the state can do by the people in the industry.
That is
as
true.
Well. Perhaps. Yeah.
Ever about viewership though? I mean, do people think about the viewership and the diasporic reach, or is it just about the state and what can happen?
No, it's actually, I think what I understand is that it's become a. I mean, see, there's one thing to have. It's one thing to have censor board rules like there are in Iran. You give 10 rules and perhaps 5 of them are ridiculous. Okay. But I think what is happening in India right now is much more, it's much more difficult and complex, because what happens is that anybody in the country who is watching the film can now raise a PIL or can file a suit against you, and anything can be offensive. A woman eating ice cream could be offensive for some reason that they would make up those reasons. they would link some kind of Muslim link, or they would link some kind of insult to the Hindu gods, to whatever is happening, and they will just go at it. And I mean, so it's just so in a way, you just don't have to clear a censor board. You just don't have to take a brave step by putting in your capital and your distribution systems at your disposal. It's also like कहीं से मतलब कोई भी आ जाएगा कुछ भी बोलने के लिए, बात ये है. तो और घुमाता रहेगा, फिर वो एक किसी ऑफिशियल के ऊपर केस कर देगा, और वो कहीं रैंडम झारखंड में रांची में कहीं केस कर देगा, फिर आपका जो ओटीटी का बंदा है वो जाता रहेगा रांची में, डेट उसकी तारीख आती रहेगी. तो मतलब that's what can you do about that?
That's shocking and painful to hear. Our episode is called CounterBlockbusters, and here we are really talking about so many different kinds of subversions that are happening, and yet we are at this messy moment. We have so many different avenues of tools of resistance, yet in a very difficult climate that Hussain and Alka, you both have talked about. What do you think that needs to change?
I mean, this is such a difficult question because, I mean, I am, and I don't know whether we can politicize this conversation more than what we've already done. Very disappointed with Rahul Gandhi being disqualified, right, from the parliament, because he. I didn't used to think much about him, but like he was this not a very impressive person whose only privilege was, this privileged person, who inherited the Gandhi name. But over the years, he's sort of, in a way, shown his ability to connect with people, right? So I don't know what needs to be done, because now he's been even disqualified. But hopefully this might galvanize the opposition to come together. And if that narrative, that political narrative, begins to change, maybe the narrative in popular culture might also begin to change. Maybe it will, slowly begin to dissipate the fear that makes, filmmakers self-censor themselves.
Thank you. Hussain?
Yeah, like change with respect to what? Like what needs to change? I mean,
in the kind of film landscape, in the cultural productions. I mean, you're a part of an industry that is creating a kind of influence in culture, the soft power in the country, so to speak.
I don't know. I mean, there's so much to change. I mean, I think one would be at a loss. There are massive structural changes that can be affected. I think one is the dependence on the male actor, the superstar male actor, that needs to definitely change. And that's not just a film industry problem, that's also a society problem, because the filmmaking people can easily counter and say that, hey, you guys stop liking those films and we'll stop making them.
Yeah.
Which is also not entirely unfair. It's not an entirely unfair argument to make. It's a business as well. When you are going to put in crores, tens of crores rupees, you would want a return for that. Now, so that's because what happens is now this may seem very simple, that the dependence on the male actor needs to change. But what things like this do, it bloats the budget of a film. When you pay an excessive amount of money to a male actor, or perhaps even a female actor, which is obviously always disproportionately less more often than not, then the budget of the film bloats up. There are several facilities and there are several other peripheral things that go up. And then, of course, the film cannot, there's a lesser probability, or rather there's a higher recovery that needs to be made to recover the costs. So that is one of the things. The second thing is that perhaps there could be a way, because I mean, the film industry is not, Hindi film industry is not a monolith. There are several people at work at several places at several points of time and in doing several things, and all of them have very different dynamics of working. things begin, things stop, things begin again after 3 years. There's no timeline, there's no process. So perhaps there could be a collective resolve, so as to at least not be petrified of the state. It's fine to be scared of the state, I presume, but not to be shaking in your boots with fear from the state is something that is a minimum request that can happen. I mean, you can be scared and still not be petrified. And then perhaps there has to be some kind of equitable, and again, I mean, it depends on the people. It's not like somebody stopping anyone or this, that, but there has to be some kind of a distribution of, like we made that वो ग्राफ बनाते ना हम, जो एक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कर्व जो बनता है, तो उसमें क्या हो रहा है कि डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कर्व तो यहाँ पे कुछ अजीब ही है. मतलब द मिडिल साइज्ड फिल्म्स आर ऑलमोस्ट एब्सेंट. आइदर देयर आर वेरी हाई प्रोडक्शन वैल्यू फिल्म्स और वेरी लो. Especially if I only considered अभी फिलहाल ये हो गया. So anywhere between say 30 to 100 crore वाला बजट वाला है, those are waning in comparison to perhaps previous years. So there has to be a distribution curve of that sort, so that people who are new making low budget films can graduate, and even in terms of money and then there are also systematic structural issues which with regards to I mean identity politics in terms of caste or religion or gender, and which of course, I mean, like any other industry in the country, our Hindi film industry is also plagued by it, and it also suffers from it. I mean, look at the credits of any film and you would know, you'd make a pyramidal structure of the credits of the film and you would know, and you can take any film from the last 30 years and do this exercise and you would know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
So, and it's not deliberate. It's not like it's been done with an evil intention. A lot of it is done out of ignorance and by the general pattern of the society. I'm not trying to absolve them either. Yeah. So there are, like I said, there are many things to be changed. I'm only just briefly, just like in hyperbole, I'm just going from one thing to another.
But this is
and yes, one last point is that one will have to make films which are more perhaps cognizant of their time and place, and cognizant of the society that one lives in, a better reflection of the society, if one calls it a reflection of society or a derivative of the society, whatever. तो मतलब थोड़ा तो समाज से जुड़ना पड़ेगा, मतलब वापस जो टूट गया है मेरे ख्याल से 30-40 साल से, 40-50 साल हो गए एक्चुअली टूटे हुए मिड 70s के बाद से. और ऐसा नहीं है पूरी तरह से टूट गया है, बट एक अनरियल जो एक एलिमेंट है वो बढ़ गया है. वो शायद अगर थोड़ा रियल की तरफ जाए तो बेहतर होगा. आई थिंक ओवर शॉर्ट टाइम.
That is absolutely amazing, and I think we want to wrap up on this very hopeful note that we are not going to shake in the boots. I think that's the phrase you used. Thank you, both of you, for a very rich and wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alka. Yeah.
Thank you, Hussain.